Hey everybody, it's the top of the hour. Right there, right then, just right then. Welcome. It's not time for the show. We'll be getting started in just a couple minutes. Grab yourself a snack, get a beverage, maybe hit the toity. Share out the link. Let your friends that aren't already here know that 6 o'clock Dad Rock will be getting started in just about 2.5 minutes. Welcome to the Virtual Stab Comedy Theater. It's time for 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. Please welcome to your screen, Corey Behringer and Court Hansen.
Hey folks, welcome to the show. I'm Corey Behringer, joined as always by Mr. Thursday Night, Court Hansen. How you doing,
Hello.
Court?
I'm okay. When I got up to go get a snack before we started, we have these cookies that are like a lemon filling, and they have powdered sugar on the outside.
Very nice.
And I inhaled a bunch of powdered sugar by accident. So,
as one does.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us right to our theme of the night, which is Rock Goes Disco. So we're going to be talking
people
tonight.
Choking on other big piles of white powder.
There was a lot of white powder in that entire era that continued well after disco. Didn't get the memo that it was over. But this week on the show, Court and I are going to be talking about not just disco, but specifically classic rock bands that attempted to get in on some of that disco skrill. They wanted to jump on that bandwagon. When Court pitched this to me, my first thought was like, this is going to be hilarious because it's going to be nothing but shit. It's going to be really bad songs. But I will say right at the top, I happen to like most of what I found, which surprised me. I mean, I'm a disco fan. I consider myself a disco fan, but I had like this other conception of crossover disco being so much worse than it actually is. Because I was thinking of like the Eagles and like just, I don't know, really superficial. But you know, that's all, you know, stuff we can get into later. I want to start with more of a broad stroke here. What's your general opinion of disco?
I think that it at its best, and I think we actually talked about this either last show or a couple shows ago, but like disco at its best is funk moving into pop territory, and disco at its worst is pop moving into funk territory. And so I think that the best disco, the stuff that holds up the best, is the stuff that maintains like funk as the primary sort of, I guess, musical genre.
Yeah,
I feel like you gotta have that. You gotta have that funk, is what I'm saying. And when you start to lose it, that's when it starts to become cornier and cornier, and it becomes the kind of thing that like Will Ferrell parodies often.
Yeah.
Like 70s guy with like lots of chest hair and stuff.
Exactly. When it's viewed as more of the cultural phenomenon of disco rather than the music of disco, which is essentially just funk with a 4 on the floor bass kick, like driving dance beat. So I mean, it's got such potential for greatness, and we're seeing that now with more recent hits of like Arcade Fire's last album, which I finally got around to listening to, full of disco, like almost to a fault ABBA disco, like totally wore it on their sleeves. And I know the Killers had basically a disco hit with The Man recently. There's just a lot of disco happening, and I'm glad for it. I'm glad that it comes back around, because it's undeniably infectious. It's not just catchy, it's infectious. It's an infectious group.
And I think that in fact, why can't I finish adjectives? That infectiousness, is that right?
That works.
Infectiousness.
Infectious.
I think that a part of that has to do also with the drug of choice.
Oh, definitely.
Being a stimulant. Because I was thinking about it, and the stuff that I found, there's things that are like very questionably, you could apply the label disco, but I think that there's enough of a stylistic influence that they still kind of are worth discussing. And I realized that disco is kind of the first club dance music where you're not going for the performance necessarily, you're going more for like the atmosphere, for like a crowd of people dancing but also talking and stuff too. And I realized that kind of bleeds into later scenes that I do kind of like more and know more about, which is like the 80s and early 90s, like Manchester stuff, which is, it's very much an extension of what disco started, which is these like neon lit, cocaine fueled nightclubs of people who wanted to like dance to 12-minute long remixes of a song that just has like the same loop over and over and over again. It's the same sort of like folk, very like repetitive rhythm based dance music that's, you know, continues all the way up to like EDM stuff now.
Definitely. That is, it's pretty clear that that's the path it took. So I'm excited to get right into this. For those of you who haven't seen the show, how it works is basically this. Court and I have both prepared a playlist. We don't know what's on each other's playlist. We sent them both over to our producer and engineer, Jesse Jones, back at the Stab Comedy Theater. So he's going to be our DJ for the evening. He's going to be bouncing back and forth between little snippets of these tracks, and then we're going to chat about them. So with that all taken care of, let's listen to the first track. of course, that was Kiss with I Was Made for Loving You. I love this song, very unironically. I think it's a banger.
It is good.
God, it's so good. I first heard this when I got one of my first CDs, really, ever, when I think it was like the last Tower Records in SAC went out of business, and we just had a field day. We got a bunch of stuff, and I got a best of Kiss, and it was my really introduction to Kiss, and that was definitely one of my favorite tracks on it. So wonderful, because it's not even just a catchy song, but like now, especially hearing it with like decent headphones, like straight in, like the tones are so crisp, especially the bass, which is something we're going to talk about a lot throughout this episode, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is the bass's time to shine, really, and at least until hip hop brought bass.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It really was. It had sort of a lull where it was almost like a prop on stage for a while in a lot of rock, I think, where it's just like you got to have a bassist, so you have a bassist. This was a time you needed a bassist because he's doing those little bouncy octave things that, God, I overdid the shit out of that when I was a kid. Like that was my bag of tricks on the bass, was just octave jumping. Fun fact I learned about this just today, like just skimming information about the songs. I guess this was Paul Stanley's proof that to point out how easy it is to write disco. Like he was just saying, it's the easiest thing. I bet I could write a really great disco song, and he co-wrote it with some other guy, not in the band, I don't think. And it was pretty much not like a harsh indictment of disco, but just like, anyone could do this. I could do this.
Yeah, it's kind of like Fight for Your Right to Party. It was a parody of like hair metal, hair metal party rock, but then it ended up becoming like a
Yes, exactly. So I liked Kiss a lot more as a kid, which I think is something a lot of people can relate to. Not as much of a fan now, but God, when I heard this, it brought me right back. And
they have a handful of songs like that are just so good. But I've never gotten too into them because when I was a kid going through my first like classic rock phase, I was talking to my mom about them, and this is back before YouTube. This is when like AOL had its like AOL music page where there would be like live performances and music videos and stuff. And the only one that they had for Kiss was some like late period concert with like strings and stuff, and all the people in all the people in the orchestra had makeup and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I know them. Yeah.
And I just remember my mom saying something like, "Yeah, the problem with Kiss is like, if you take away all the strings and the makeup and everything, there's just not that much there." And that really did stick with me a little bit. And
she was right.
Even though
there really isn't that much there.
Even though like Mike LaRosa would probably beg to differ, and they do absolutely have some diehards.
Yeah.
But that did kind of stand out as just the criticism that sticks with Kiss is that it's like you strip away the makeup and the masks and the flames and all the showiness, and it's just like decent arena rock at best. Yeah. But some of those songs excel beyond that, I think.
I think it's fair to assume that had they not had the pageantry around them, they probably would have had a couple hits and fizzled out. I think that's probably what would have happened.
But the pageantry, I think that's just as valid of an artistic statement as
it's show business.
Music. But it just like that did kind of sour them for me early on, was my mom's explanation.
Yeah, and I did kind of everything. Like you should expect that of a band you like. There should be across the board quality.
Yeah, and I remember like I went back to looking at the video and I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of silly. It's like, yeah, it's an orchestra. They have face paint on. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it's not like Rock and Roll All Night is that elevated by a string section.
No, not at all. Let's hear another, Jesse.
That, of course, is the notorious Beach Boys, their 1979 remake of their 1967 non-hit "Here Comes the Night." So that's the short version that we heard. The long version is about 12 minutes long, I want to say, and there's a rumored extended one beyond that is an even longer Light Disco remix. I don't know what else. I don't really know what to say about it other than that it's like sad. It's really, really sad because you can hear the talent of the band. I mean, the harmonies are being used to good effect to make a Beach Boys disco song.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately just such a... It was like a last-ditch effort for them, too, because they had like a half-completed album, and then they brought in Bruce Johnston to like finish producing it, and they just kind of like made this long dance song. And it's... I don't know. What did you think of it from what you could hear, at least?
Yeah, so... I actually had kind of mixed feelings about it because on some level I actually enjoyed it, but I think where I'd have critique on it is that it doesn't seem to know what it wants to do.
Exactly.
Like it's trying several things. It's trying Beach Boys right off the bat, obviously. It's trying that like to maintain its identity as a Beach Boys song. But then you've got the very cliche disco string section.
Yes,
it's conflicting with what I do like about the song, which is the synth.
Yes.
That's a cool synth tone that they have, and it made me wonder. I don't really know much about their influences at that time.
Well,
if had they been turned on to Kraftwerk, like is that a thing? Do you know of?
So so Brian Wilson was working with synths from the like early 70s on, and by the late 70s, pretty much all his stuff was synth based. So that had been with the band for a while, as they had been experimenting with like early like Moog synthesizers and all sorts of other things. But this track is actually co-produced with a guy that I've brought up a few times before, Kurt Betcher, the kind of like the sunshine pop producer who never quite found like mainstream stardom or success. And so this is and he's actually on this list on my playlist a couple times in different cases, but I think that he was kind of in a... What am I trying to say here? Yes, synths were a part of the band for a while, and Bruce Johnston, who is like an on-again, off-again Beach Boy, he had kind of gotten into disco producing, disco style of producing, as well as Kurt Betcher and some other people. And so it just kind of bled over into the Beach Boys when they were really desperate for a hit, because they had like 3 albums in a row that weren't really selling. But
it is sad. like it now, yeah.
There are a lot of cool production things when it's just instrumental. Like if you're willing to sit and listen to it and just be like, okay, this is just a cocaine fueled like disco sunshine pop production, then you can get a little bit more out of it. But the other problem is that Here Comes the Night is not a very catchy song in its original incarnation either. So for a song to repeat that melody so many times, especially in the long version, it just gets a little tedious.
Totally.
But yeah, it's an interesting point in their history when they were really just striving for any commercial or critical relevance. And this was just seen as like a death blow to them. It actually charted okay in Europe, I want to say, because they like dancing there more than in the US,
I mean, they definitely got the discotheques before we did in a big way.
Man, my voice is still all messed up from that cookie. But yeah, it's just it is what it is, and it's very much like here's a sunshine pop style production of disco music, and for better or worse, it's there. Some people really, really hate it and are deeply offended by it. Other people defend it and say like, oh no, it's actually really, really good. And I think it's just like a misguided... I think
it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
misguided is a good word for it.
Misguided thing.
I think it's what you tend to get if you throw everything at the wall and hope that something sticks. Because if they were to strip away some of the stuff in this track, I bet it would be a lot better. Like if they were to make it just a synth-focused thing, I think I'd prefer that.
It's but we'll get more to Kurt Detcher and his role in disco, depending on what else comes up in the playlist. Let's hear another one.
And that is Rod Stewart with If You Think I'm Sexy. One of the earliest songs that I can remember that I really hammed it up to my parents with, like as a little kid. So I have the fond memory with that. Just, it's a goofy song. It remains a very goofy song.
Yeah.
But listening to it closer all these years later, I find myself honing in a little more on some of the interesting instrumentation. Like I really like the guitars on it. It's doing not just your typical chunky disco rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing these interesting like picking patterns with an echo, and I don't know. It's just those little textures that I think are commendable in a genre that mostly deals in played out tropes. Like that's really what built this genre, is everyone kind of doing the same thing in a slightly different way.
And that almost had like a post-punk feel to it. Like later post-punk, when it started to become a little more dancey, like it definitely sounded like some New Order, like 87 to 89, like post-punk stuff had a lot of that kind of, those kinds of bass lines combined with that like funk, almost like funk guitar.
Yeah, if it wasn't produced so like polished, we would hear it along like with other like just UK post-punk stuff. Yeah. I like Rod Stewart in general. Never been enough of a fan to like listen to a whole album.
Yeah, same.
But God, what a voice! I mean, really, like great voice.
Yeah, sometimes it can be grating, but sometimes it's perfect.
Yeah,
depends on the song.
Definitely. I think the more sincere sounding, the better. With him in particular, like when it's not just as your typical pop. I definitely prefer the more like ballady Rod Stewart to rock Rod Stewart.
Yeah, like the early 70s stuff more.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hear another.
Should you
That's probably the most questionably associated with disco of any of my picks, but that's Happy Mondays with 24-Hour Party People. I wanted to include that one because, like I was saying earlier, disco is kind of an early version of the kind of like club and dance music that we would see later. And the album that this is on came out in 85, I think, 84, 85, maybe 86, which is, disco's only 5 years ago at that point. And so to me, it does seem kind of almost like a unexpected reworking of disco through punk into like a new kind of dance music that had that kind of like funk rhythm to it, but a little bit more noisy and energetic and not as like clean.
Totally.
Not as like, not the very like clean and precise funk of like Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Happy Mondays, but was this the album that was co-produced with Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth?
I don't
because
think
that would make
so.
a lot of sense to me. Like off the heels of Tom Tom Club.
I think that this was produced by Bernard Sumner
might have been
from
before.
New Order.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. But it does and it's I love that we have the new audio set up so that we can hear it more clearly, because the bass in that song just
So
like
cool.
drills into your brain.
Yeah.
And at the same time
Yeah.
there's like that really fast funk strumming. They're playing like a funk chord and a funk rhythm, but at a punk pace, and it creates this like I think really good dance music. I think it's like the platonic ideal of, at least my platonic ideal of dance music, because it isn't so polished and corny that it's inhuman, but it's still and it doesn't have so much energy that it's incomprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like right in the middle where I love it.
And I think a lot of that is in thanks to the vocals too, because the vocals provide this sort of like thrashy I don't know, like a lack of any I don't know the word I'm looking for, but just like it doesn't give a fuck, basically.
Yeah, I
like,
mean, Sean
the way
Ryder
he's
was
yelling,
just Sean Ryder was like a madman.
Yeah.
Like an incomprehensible madman, and the other like notable personality in the group, Bez, just a weird looking ecstasy dealer who played maracas and danced really, really strangely. And his weird dancing is kind of also a big part of that Manchester dance scene, which again, like disco is a very particular form of dancing, and then Happy Mondays kind of have their own very particular form of dancing, but it comes back to that disco and funk influence. So that's why I included that one, despite it being pretty far past disco.
I think it certainly counts in my book for disco. If it were to come out today, it would still be disco to me. And I dug it. That's one of a very few Happy Monday songs I've ever heard, and it makes me want to go back and listen to some.
Yeah, they have some,
because that's cool.
They have some really, really good. Once you know what to listen to, and it's not just this kind of off-putting barrage of like this weird guy yelling and the bass and everything. Once you kind of know to listen for this like fusion of punk and dance music, it's like a early kind of dance punk, you could say, like you'd later see with like Death from Above 1979 or
that's what I was thinking of.
Sound System or Test Icicles. Do you remember them?
Yes.
Yeah. I think
I dig the melding of those two genres. I think disco and punk go hand in hand so well. Like my favorite post-punk stuff is basically that. Like I mean, Franz Ferdinand Tonight is to me one of the best unintentional disco albums ever made. Like,
yeah, I guess I hadn't thought of it in that context, but that is true. They do have.
Oh yeah, it's a disco album. Like it has a lot of different influences. But...
I mean, even like Modest Mouse has that kind of funk guitar in what's their big hit? Float On.
Float On. It has that.
Has that almost like, interesting. I never thought of it in that sense.
Infectious.
Let's hear another song.
All right. Well, this is always have to include the one that you both had on the same list. Yeah. So here's that one. This week's that one.
It's The Dead. I'm sure it's The Dead.
Yeah.
Okay, that was Grateful Dead with Shakedown Street. Court, tell me everything you know about this song.
So Grateful Dead is primarily known as a weed band and an acid band, but by the mid-'70s, they became a cocaine band and a heroin band and an alcohol band. But before that really started to take its toll, there was a brief period of disco dead. Before Donna Jean Godchaux and her husband Keith, who was their keyboardist, and you heard the female vocals on the track, that was Donna Jean singing. It was before they left the band, and there's just a brief period of like coke-fueled dead that worked, where it didn't feel desperate for them to be playing this kind of disco music. And It's a little bit harder to hear that in the studio version of that song. Even though I love it, I think that it works as like a really clean, slickly produced song. The live versions too are very, very cool. And yeah, that's the album that's on, by the same name, gets a lot of flack for being like one of the worst sounding Dead albums, and there are some songs on it that just aren't produced or mixed very well. But the title track has, I don't know what it is about it, it's just so good.
I loved it. Seriously. And I think, going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, which is your take on when disco's done best, this is a perfect example of that, because this is a funk track. Like, it's a disco track because of the rhythm, but everything else is funk to the max. Like, this is such a great funk track.
I think that the bands that transitioned into the disco era successfully are the ones that kind of incorporated the darker sides of that, like, cocaine nightmare culture of the late 70s and early 80s, because, like, this song just has kind of a spooky feel to it. It's got those, like, it's got some like cheerful sounding parts to it, but for the most part it's kind of ominous. It sounds like a city that's kind of like descending into cocaine madness, which is also what the lyrics are about too. It's just about a street that's becoming dilapidated, and I don't know, I just think it somehow captures the seedier side of that time period in a more authentic way than even some of the like actual disco from the era. It just sounds like a dark cocaine binge probably sounds if you're in that band.
And that makes so much more sense to what the disco era was. That's why, like, my favorite disco is that. Like, that's talking, like, because think about, if you're a normal person, which I'll go out on a limb and assume we both are, a disco, especially that time, would be a terrifying place for us. I wouldn't want to go there. Like,
no, that would be bad. It would be like going to a rave not have a good time.
That's a nightmare. That's a living nightmare. So I mean, I brought it up already, but like Franz Ferdinand Tonight is that. Like, it's just, it's the soundtrack to a horrible night.
It's very paranoid.
Yes, very paranoid.
I think that disco can have a very paranoid kind of feeling to it.
Yeah.
And there's another song that I know is on the queue that has that same sort of paranoid feel. We'll see if we get to it.
I think maybe this is pointing out to me that, I mean, maybe this is a thought that I'll change my stance on, but I'm starting to think that disco may be the best example of a drug influencing the music itself in not necessarily a positive way, but an effective way, like the most effective. Whereas,
you mean, like rapid change?
Yeah, like, you know, we could point to psychedelic music going hand in hand with acid and like that whole thing, but was that really a successful influence? I mean,
I think that more the hard rock influence than the psychedelic influence is what it more like the heavier Dead stuff, but also like Iron Butterfly and Quicksilver Messenger Service and some of those heavier acid rock bands. I think that that's kind of the more lasting legacy than the psychedelic aspect of it. Like, that stuff didn't really get revived until later on with like Paisley Underground stuff.
And even then, not as effective.
But I mean, there is something to be said for LSD and its influence, because like the Grateful Dead sound guy, Bear, the guy that the cartoon bears, it's on all the merchandise and stuff, the one that those are based on, he pretty much supplied the country's acid for like a couple years. Like pretty much all of the acid in that rock scene came through him. And so that is it's such a like focused thing where this one guy is like, there's still people today, I think, that have like, it's almost like collector's items for like the most dedicated Deadheads, is to like get a sheet of like Owsley Stanley III's like original LSD, because he made so much of it. He like flooded the market with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I think that it's similar to LSD, the cocaine influence. Because, I can't really think of anything except, I don't know. I mean, we'll get to other time periods as well and discuss the drugs.
I feel like most people would. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would just throw out weed in general, but I don't really see that as like a dramatic influence on an entire genre of music.
It goes, except for like reggae.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But even then, I feel like they would have come up with that music without it anyway. It's just around them. Let's hear another. That was Back Chat by Queen, a song I heard for the first time today and fell in love with today. I really dig it. It's from the album Hot Space, and this is a John Deacon composition, the bassist, who I find a lot of times his compositions are some of my favorite Queen songs.
I don't know enough about Queen, honestly, to know who composed what. I know like Brian May's guitar style and guitar sound. Freddie Mercury's style of singing.
That kind of brings up another thing I wanted to talk about, is the guitar in this in particular. Going back to John Deacon writing this, so he went into the writing process for this album. For his songs, he wanted to strip away any rock notions at all. He wanted to just make funk. He wanted to do like just basically move away from any kind of hard rock, which I guess was a point of contention for the rest of the band, especially Brian May, because he was having Brian not, basically rock out. And I don't know necessarily if he plays it on the record itself, but I know in the music video for this, Brian May is playing a telly and not his Red Special. So right off the bat, he's like kind of pivoting
out of his element.
Yeah, and to like benefit the song, because really this sounds like a Telecaster. I'm pretty sure he is playing a Telecaster on the record. It just has that beautiful, like almost twang to it.
Yeah, someday I'll have a Telecaster. That's my dream guitar, is to have a nice, good Telecaster.
Just get yourself a Mexican Telecaster. They sound just as good as Americans. And anyone who actually knows their shit will tell you that too. You don't need to be snob about it. But this is just a rad song. The bass line is wonderful, as like of course it would be. It's written by a bassist. I don't know. The other thing I was struck by in the video was everyone really looks like they're having a good time.
Oh yeah,
like
that's good.
Genuinely, like they don't seem like they're acting. Like even Brian May looks like he's just thrilled to be playing the Telecaster.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that song. I think it's a successful disco track.
Yeah.
So far, I haven't heard any. I think I only put one in my list of things that I consider a miss. I don't. I think everything else pretty much works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh. Now let's hear another one. The Clash, Magnificent Seven, from their I think it's a triple album, it might just be a double album, but it's a long album, Sandinista, which was a pretty big stylistic departure for them. They had kind of ditched punk by that point and started experimenting with like dub and reggae and funk music a little bit more.
Yeah.
And this song was influenced in particular actually by like early rap, like Grandmaster Flash especially.
Oh, yeah.
Because they actually took him on tour with them. He was their opener, and the audience like booed because they didn't go to see, you know, a black dude rapping. They wanted to see the Clash, but the Clash refused to like they came out and like refused to play until the audience like respected.
That's awesome.
Grandmaster
I didn't
Flash.
know that.
And so when I first discovered that song, I didn't really know about its connection to early hip hop at all. It sounded like a disco song to me. And I think that this, like we were talking about with Happy Mondays, that infusion of like punk into dance music, this is kind of a proto version of that almost. I mean, because the Clash, they're doing pretty like a club remix of the Clash song almost, but it's an original song.
That is exactly what it sounds like, especially with the bass line, which I don't know about you, but like when I hear that, my fingers hurt. That is such a busy bass line.
I spent so much time in middle school like trying to figure that out by ear, and I just couldn't play it fast enough because I had little weak sausage fingers.
Such a fast line, like seriously. And it sounds like, I mean, maybe my ears aren't quite sharp enough to know the difference of this, but it also doesn't sound like it's being played with a pick. For some reason, it sounds like it's being plucked with two fingers.
I think so.
It has that quality to it, and it's just, what a maniac! Like that's an insane line to do the entire song with, you know.
And it's just such a cool song. It's also another one of those like darker sounding songs from that period. I've never really sat down and looked at the lyrics. There's only like fragments that come through because Joe Strummer doesn't really enunciate that well. And I don't know. I just think that's a cool song. It was between that or Train in Vain, which also has kind of a disco feel to it. But this one felt a little more in line with it. So that's
I think so. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Let's hear another. That was Paul McCartney with Dress Me Up as a Robber. This was my bad one. This was the one I chose because I do not think it's very good. And I think having listened now to the Beach Boys disco song, I can put my finger on what I don't like about this song. It doesn't know what it wants to be either. It's trying so many things, and I think it, to the fault of the Paul McCartney mode of I'm going to do several different sort of movements in a song.
Which rarely works.
Right?
I love
That's
Paul
what
McCartney,
I've tried to tell so many of my friends. Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work to have one song stop and another completely different song start. Different tempo, different style of singing, different lyrical content. It can be very, very jarring, and I think he kind of needs people to tell him no sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with this song, it's just like it starts off with like, okay, so first I'll say I think that all the parts are just kind of dumb. Like in general, like even if he were to just stick to one, even those aren't very good, because he starts with what is basically like a prog sort of guitar tone and melody that's like dumb prog. It's like a band trying to be prog, and then he goes into the disco thing. And then he goes into sort of like the salsa flamenco guitar.
Yeah, which I like that part the best, almost like the Latin, almost like bossa nova kind of style.
If it would have just been that, it'd be fine.
That is where, that's kind of a zone that Fish gets into. And it can be a little grating sometimes when they go hard on that like Latin dance style. But when it's used kind of mellow, like at least from that part of the song, because I hadn't heard that song before, and I did like that part though, where it had that kind of Latin style to it.
Yeah, I like the album that this came off of. This is Tug of War. It has some other songs I really enjoy off of it that were on. Give my regards to Broad Street, but yeah, this song, big miss for me. Not a fan, and a lot of people agree. Apparently, this was panned by a lot of critics as a low point. Let's hear another.
Jesse, can I make an audible? Because there's a song that's very important for me to get to.
Hold on.
He has his mic off.
Yeah, exactly. Just tell him what
I got it.
Jesse, can you play the surf instructor?
All right. We can do that one. 1 second. It'll take a second to cue that up. That's not where I was going.
This is actually perfect. No. Take your time, because this will give us an opportunity to give some Dad Rock news. Court set up an Instagram for us, so now anyone can follow us on Instagram at Dad Rock Talk. Please do. We're trying to make it sort of the hub for all things 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. We want to put up a lot of goodies there, like fun images, for upcoming shows. Talking about future guests, which, by the way, we have one next week. We're going to be joined by a good buddy of Stab Comedy Theater, Parker Newman, to talk all about Iron Maiden. I am pleased as punch for this.
It's going to be very
so much fun.
Yeah, different. We were saying before we started, it's a very different branch of Dad Rock that I'm excited to get into.
But undeniably dad. It is the daddest of all metal.
Yeah, although we did make the distinction that there is Uncle Rock as well.
Yes,
and I think that Iron Maiden does a little bit crossover into Uncle Rock.
My uncle was the guy who got me into Iron Maiden. He was the main man in the family. So yeah, that plays out.
All right.
Just reiterating, follow us please at Instagram at Dad Rock Talk. Who knows? Maybe when this thing takes off like we know it will, we could start having some giveaways and fun shit like for the live shows whenever we're allowed to have live shows again.
Yes. And if you want to talk about a band or a time period or a genre with us, shoot the Instagram a message and we can start talking about it.
Yeah, or even just comment suggestions for future shows. We will listen because, believe me, we usually come up with the themes for these shows the day before the show. So it'd be cool if we had some ideas loaded in the chamber. Please follow us there. And whenever Jesse gets that going,
all right, we're all set.
This will be the last tune of the night.
All right.
What? No problem. For what? No, forget it, man. What is this song gonna be? I want to know what this is.
We need a goddamn disco hit.
Why?
I don't know.
Because we need
Money.
Yeah, you said it, pal. Okay, we'll take the money.
Well,
right?
is it okay if we do a disco song and make money with it? Okay. Walk the nose, trim a little, hang your toes, in the middle, kick out a baby, can't get no ding, paddle on out, just doing my thing. Surf tomorrow, surf's up, they say. Surf tomorrow, surf's up all day. Got my board, got my wax. Surf tomorrow, kick back and relax.
So that, of course, is the Surf Punks with the Surf Instructor.
I've never heard that.
So the Surf Punks, they are from the late 70s, but they continued through the 80s, and they are the band of the younger brother of Daryl Dragon, who was the captain of Captain and Tennille.
Okay.
So the captain's younger brother was the main guy in the Surf Punks, who were like a comedy surf punk band. Mm-hmm. And this song, I believe, came out the same year as the Beach Boys disco song.
Oh.
Which, it gets even weirder, though, because Daryl Dragon and Dennis Dragon, the younger brother who's in the Surf Punks, they both were touring members of the Beach Boys in the early 70s. And the captain co-wrote a bunch of songs with Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boys drummer. And so we've had what was the other one that you picked that was kind of like a parody disco song that ended up becoming a good disco song? Oh, the Kiss one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this one, my dad showed me this one when I was like pretty little, and that intro skit where they're just like laughing about it's just so infectiously funny.
Totally.
And I didn't realize that it was from the 70s when I first heard it. I thought it was like Blink-182, how they would have like joke songs as well.
It doesn't sound like the 70s. It really doesn't.
No.
I would have guessed like maybe late 80s, and only because I associate with like Dr. Demento. It feels like Dr. Demento.
Most of their songs are about bathing suits or boobs underneath bathing suits and the size of them and how much they think about them and how much they like them. And all those songs are pretty funny too, but this one I think is just especially funny because it's this weird intersection of disco, which they're making fun of, but doing in a pretty admirable like impression.
Yeah.
Surf rock, which has this direct connection to the Beach Boys, and then punk music. And so it's this weird case of like the thing it's parodying, bringing together all these genres I like into like an admittedly annoying, but very, very catchy fake gimmick song with like a fake dance called the Surf Instructor.
I dug it. Like, it also reminded me like quite a bit, actually. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dismemberment Plan.
Yes. It actually,
this sounds like the Dismemberment Plan. Like, like going down the, like, I forget what song it is off of, I think it's off of Is Terrified.
It does kind of have that weird, almost like nerdy style of singing that Dismemberment Plan has.
Yeah, and that plunky rhythm, the boom, da, boom, da, boom, like, yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to make sure that we got that song in there because it's it's still one of the funniest things. Every time I listen to it, I laugh at the beginning because just the delivery on that opening sketch is just so funny. And then when the song kicks in and he goes like, okay, it's a great dead on, like cheesy parody from the time.
One other thing it reminded me of, and then we'll wrap up, like kind of uncannily. I don't know if you ever heard the Bob and Doug McKenzie sketch with Geddy Lee for the Great White North. It was a stable on like Dr. Demento and stuff, but it has that similar intro of the Bob and Doug McKenzie characters talking about how they need to make a hit record and maybe we can call up Geddy Lee from Rush. So they do, and Geddy Lee is on the track. Like it has that very, very similar opening.
Yeah, I don't know why that's always so funny to me, because it's not like musicians are good actors most of the time, let alone good voice actors.
Maybe that's why, because it's endearing. I think
when
it's very endearing.
Yeah, I like them. I don't know.
I'll always be a fan of Skids.
Yeah,
they never age well, and I love them all.
One in the Surf Punk song does, because I didn't know when it was from.
Well, that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with special guest Parker Newman to talk about Iron Maiden. Please join us for 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk next week. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
This is where I was going to go last. Because I legitimately enjoy this song.
It's the end credits of Boogie Nights.
Yep. All right. Stick around. Special edition of Fill My Heart coming up in just a half hour. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.